opportunity for Q&A on the first section of it. And then there is a shorter, later presentation. I understand, Kevin, it's about 5 minutes, maybe 10? 10 plus,
depending on the discussion.
5? Yeah.
Say what you need to
I don't
say.
like Kevin anymore. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's how it's going to break up. We will have an opportunity for Q&A, but I would love, unless it's like very quick clarifying, they used a term we didn't understand or something like that, I'd love to be able to get through the presentation first and then have our discussion, but use your judgment on that. Mr. Smith or Mr. Milburn, you want to do any opening comments? Or?
Oh, I think we're
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, members of the public. It's a great opportunity to be here this evening to continue our conversation around the district response to Bill 25. As many of you will remember, we were here discussing the possibility of Bill 25 in October in a workshop and kind of anticipating some of the changes that were being proposed. So since that time, Bill 25 has been adopted and staff have been working hard to put together a proposed approach on how to address the issues raised by Bill 25 and some of the considerations that should go into implementing small-scale multi-unit housing in the district to make sure it works for the district. As been alluded to, we do have a lot of material to cover this evening, so we are going to propose with the blessing of the chair to break it up into 2 parts. I'll be presenting on what we're calling the macro scale issues. So we'll be looking at exemptions and seeking some direction from council on how to approach that, addressing some of the staff concerns that have been raised in some of the transit areas, and implementing SHMU and preserving future growth opportunities, and then also some conversation around tenure and how to approach that in implementing SHMU. The second part, as was alluded to, will be a bit more technical and site level in terms of its focus. So looking at some of the zone inputs, proposed regulation, and renderings to give a sense of what SHMU might look like in the district if we implemented the proposed inputs and regulations that are being put forward this evening. So just a quick background. I'm sure most people are familiar with small-scale multi-unit housing, but I will be brief. The province introduced Bill 44 at the end of 2023, which amended the Local Government Act and introduces the concept of small-scale multi-unit housing. During that time, the deadline at that time was for all municipalities to implement SHMU by the end of June 2024. The district did respond and complied with the legislation as it was written at the time by permitting essentially a house, suite, and coach house on every single family lot in the district. Since that time, in November of this year, Bill 25 received royal assent, and that changed the rules, and that has precipitated this conversation because now we need to consider up to 4 or 6 units on the vast majority of single-family lots in the district. So just again, another thing coming back to timing, we had a conversation about this in January. Staff are proposing that we run the response and the implementation of SHMU in conjunction with the larger zoning bylaw rewrite. We're having a workshop today on SHMU. Tomorrow evening, we're back again to discuss broader changes to the zoning bylaw, but the intention is to bring forward all the necessary amendments to implement SHMU, both from necessary OCP amendments and zoning bylaw amendments as part of the broader package of the zoning bylaw rewrite. That would be is anticipated to come back to council for first reading after a series of workshops through February in mid-April, followed by a public hearing in May, and then eventual adoption in June to satisfy the legislative deadline to respond to Bill 25 by the end of June this year. So SHMU at the basic level has certain density requirements. On lots less than roughly 3,000 square feet, you only need to do 3 units. There's very few of those size lots in the district, and you'll see those numbers coming up subsequently. The vast majority are larger than 3,000 square feet, and therefore we will need to consider the requirement for lots greater than 3,000 square feet to have a minimum of 4 units, and then for lots that are over 3,000 square feet within 400 meters of a frequent transit stop, they are required to have 6 units. And we'll have mapping to show where those areas are right here.
Can I just interrupt?
Sure.
Because, I'm sorry, but you're saying required to have 6 units, required to have 4.
It's a good distinction. So up to.
Yes,
So,
thank you. It's
yes.
important because it's not that anyone's
thank you.
forcing homeowners to have
Zoning.
4 or 6 units.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that
They can if
clarification.
they want to.
Yes, so yes, I should be clear, the zoning will be written such as that all existing homes, you could build a single family home and that's it, and range from a single family home to a suite, single family home to a coach house, all the way up, depending if you're in which area, 4 units or 6 units. And Kevin will go into a bit more of the details on what those forms could look like, but we'll stick for now back at the macro level, but thank you for that clarification. So we have 57 lots that are 3 units. There's not enough of them to really show up on this map. As you can see here in the lighter blue color, the vast majority of single family lots in the district, roughly about 18,000, it's kind of covered up by this, but will be 4 units, up to 4 units. And then the darker blue areas you can see here around Lynn Valley Road, and then again Marine, where we have our most frequent levels of transit service currently. Those are the areas in the darker blue that would be permitted under the legislation for up to 6 units. The legislation also allows for exemptions. So you would have seen on the previous map, there's no SHMU allowed outside of the urban containment boundary. So that is the largest restriction on SHMU, is it can happen outside of the urban containment boundary. Heritage designated and protected properties are exempt. If you don't have a connection to water and sanitary services, you are not allowed to do SHMU. Very few lots meet that or fall into that category in the district. Larger lots, so lots over an acre in size, are not eligible for SHMU, these are exempted. Similarly, within the 2 designated transit-oriented areas, those are exempted for SHMU because they have minimum higher densities than what SHMU would enable. And then where we would like to have a bit of further conversation with council is areas subject to certain hazards can be exempted. But before we get into that, here's a map of kind of the statutory exempt lots in terms of large lots, those without sufficient sewer connection and heritage protection. There's only 156 within the SHMU area that meet that those designations, and those are identified there. So the first issue we'd like to get ask for some direction and some commentary from council on is the approach to natural hazard exemptions. Many of you will remember in June 2024, staff did provide a report on natural hazard exemptions. It's attachment 6 of the report tonight, outlining some of the natural hazard concerns that staff identified and are proposing to exempt from SHMU requirements. Those are primarily the lots that fall within the wildfire development permit area, and also some lots that fall within flood zones. And the rationale for exempting those properties is those are hazards, and the densities proposed by SHMU raise hazard and safety concerns that can't be mitigated by site level response. It is a more broader issue, and therefore that provides the rationale for exempting those properties. And staff are recommending that we continue with those proposed exemptions that was presented in the report from June 2024. So what does that look like? You can see here, again, the purple properties are the properties that would be exempted. Primarily, you will find them along the forest edge and along the forested areas around creeks. And then down in the Seymour area, some of the flood zone risk areas as well are exempted. So if council would like to move forward with that, then the implementation of SHMU shifts slightly, and this is the lots that would still remain eligible for SHMU after we implement, take out those roughly 7,000 lots for exemptions. There would be roughly 13,000 single-family lots in the district that would still be eligible for SHMU. Second issue that we would like to have a conversation and seek some direction from council on is what to do in a Lionsgate Marine Drive area. As many of you will remember from the conversations we had with the OCP update, there was some consideration in response to the active bus rapid transit planning that's underway that would impact most dramatically that area. There was some contemplation of higher density forms in the area that surrounds the existing center of Lionsgate. Staff are concerned that if SSMUH is implemented in those single-family neighborhoods, it may preclude future higher density growth that would be envisioned should and when bus rapid transit investment moves forward. So there are some tools that we can use under the legislation and within our own regulatory powers to address some of those concerns should council choose to do that. The first option is to seek an extension for certain areas around Lionsgate from implementing SSMUH. And this would require a council resolution and then a submission to the province, and they can say yes or no to that extension request. And staff are proposing that we should council be interested in an extension request to address this issue, that we would come back to council in March before the first reading of the zoning bylaw updates to seek the council resolution to submit that extension application to the province. And again, another option would be to amend the OCP in that area to signal an intention in the future, once transit investment has been secured and solidified, for higher density development in that area. And so staff are proposing that staff or council could reconsider some of the OCP amendments that were proposed as part of the OCP update and amend the OCP to run with that extension application and strengthen that application to the province. Other tools that were considered that staff don't recommend at this time is you could amend the zoning bylaw to take away the single family zoning and move it to higher densities over and above what would be enabled by SSMUH. Staff don't recommend that approach at this time. Similarly, the legislation for 6-unit SSMUH areas does allow the zoning to require a unit of affordable, the 6th unit to be either affordable or supportive, subject to the provision of an economic analysis saying that that is economically viable. And this is a tool that could be used in this area, and staff at this time don't recommend approaching. So to kind of help visualize what the issues are at play here, this map here is kind of a close-up of the Lionsgate Marine Drive area. You have Marine Drive here. This green line shows where TransLink is currently envisioning and consulting on the route for the bus rapid transit. And 2 station areas have been identified as potential station areas at the intersection, in and around the intersection of Capilano and Marine, and then again at Pemberton and Marine as well. So staff would anticipate, certainly within 400 meters, but those would be transit-oriented areas, and under provincial legislation have minimum densities much higher than SSMUH. So again, though there are some gaps, all these areas would be in kind of, if and when your bus rapid transit does get put in, those would be transit-rich areas and would be best suited for higher form of residential development. So staff, with council's direction this evening, could return in March with a report outlining some of those potential changes to the OCP and the extension area request that we would be proposing to submit to the province. So as I did mention in consideration for Lionsgate, the legislation more broadly does allow for the requirement to have that 6th unit either be affordable or supportive, subject to economic viability. And so that could also be utilized for the 6-unit areas in and around Lynn Valley Road. Again, staff at this time don't recommend requiring this at this time, but it's something that we could monitor in the future and implement in the future. The final issue that from a macro level that we would like to get council's direction and input on is the consideration of implementing rental tenure zone, residential rental tenure zoning. It's a mouthful. So that is a tool that council could implement on SSMUH to require 1 or more units to be rental units. This would help further some of our affordable housing goals and the provision of more rental housing throughout the district. Looking at kind of providing those options in various places where we don't see as many now. That being said, the provincial guidelines strongly caution against utilizing rental tenure zoning, as it could possibly make the development of SHMU economically unfeasible. So staff, should council have a desire to pursue and consider further analysis on rental tenure zoning, staff again would, with that direction, bring back a report in March outlining further analysis, bringing back some economic analysis, and framing up some of the implications of proceeding with rental tenure zoning in the implementation of SHMU. Obviously, there are significant infrastructure and servicing concerns with regards to implementing SHMU. Those did come up in the spring of 2024, and at that time, this council chose to make some amendments to the waterworks bylaw, designating SHMU as needing to meet the multifamily requirements for fire flow. So again, taking steps to ensure that this form of housing did kind of continue and deliver on the ability to provide adequate fire flows to fight fires. Similarly, changes were made to the sewer bylaw to indicate that any SHMU development would need to be in areas where there was adequate servicing or a capital project approved by council to increase the capacity of the sewer for that area before a permit would be issued for a SHMU development. So council did take some steps with regards to address some of the concerns around servicing. That being said, there are still a lot of issues that we don't have all the answers to at this point with regard to servicing that we will need to be studied. There will also be some considerations on how we handle the requirements for, do we want to require sidewalks, or what level of street improvements would we require? There's also concerns and considerations that need to be given to other utilities requirements, such as BC Hydro for servicing SHMU developments as well. So those all will need to be considered as we move forward with implementing SHMU. And then the last item we want to talk about, or I would like to speak to, is the growth implications of implementing SHMU. Currently, in our single-family neighborhoods, so that's roughly 20,000 lots, the district on average processes around 120 permits for new builds, coach houses, or major additions a year. And so that's less than 1% of the lots turn over and have any significant redevelopment on an annual basis. So based on those trends, staff are not anticipating a tremendous uptake at this point on SHMU in terms of seeing a gross variation on that. And this is also based on our conversations with many of the other municipalities that implemented SHMU in 2024. But it should also be noted, one, there are a myriad of factors that go into whether a property will be redeveloped or not, that are not subject to municipal control, market conditions, construction costs, site conditions, if it's really steep or what have you. So there will be many challenges in terms of implementing SHMU. It also should be said, there will be costs to implementing SHMU. It will be a higher or more expensive form of development to service and administer compared to higher density forms of residential development. So that's kind of a quick summary of the 4 key topic areas that we would like on the macro level to seek council direction on. So again, just to summarize, looking at kind of getting council's thoughts on the approach being proposed for natural hazard exemptions. So that's that wide band around the edge of the district and down the creek areas. Whether and how we should address preserving frequent transit areas for future growth. So that's a consideration of doing an extension request. OCP amendments are the kind of staff recommendation. And then the other options would be to change some of the zoning and implement that special unit or supportive unit for affordable housing. The third issue, again, tying in with that last item, the additional approaches was the support of our affordable unit, whether we should do that more broadly for all the 6 unit areas. And then finally, whether we should do further analysis on implementing rental tenure zoning on SHMU. And with that, I will sit down and look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moss. Just quickly on the last one. If I heard you right, analysis will come back in March?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's another, there's some other recommendations where it says there's not enough time to do the analysis. So Is this something that's given priority?
Yes, we've been prioritizing this one. We've kind of done some work behind the scenes. You know, obviously we wouldn't implement it without council direction, but anticipating that that might be a tool that council would like to see further analysis on, we've been doing some work kind of in the background in the lead up to today.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is, there is time between now and before the implementation, if we don't get an extension in June, for staff to do some further analysis, and it could be up to council to decide whether it's the rental tenure or potentially developing certain sites in the Lionsgate area or.
So I think it should be important. The extension requests would be for a very limited area
Okay.
in Lionsgate.
Right.
All the other properties, and the extension is subject to provincial approval, so there's no guarantee that we will receive that approval for the extension. But beyond that, all the other lots will be required to address the legislation by the end of June.
There's a part where additional analysis is required if we were to go site specific for 2.3.
You're talking in terms of the rental tenure zoning or the
Issue 2.3 option, but anyways. 2.3. 2.3 on page
2.3 was amend zoning
Page
bylaw.
27.
Oh, you're talking about upzoning?
Yeah, if we were to pick specific sites, it talks about not having enough time, but is it correct to say there is time, but it's up to council to decide where that puts that time?
Well, I mean, I think where the recommendation not to pursue amending the zoning bylaw in Lionsgate is coming from the work that was undertaken in the OCP update. There's a lot of complexity to developing Lionsgate and doing it well. That while we could signal with OCP amendments that there is a long-term vision to change the densities there, council would still retain control for development applications in such time to undertake further planning studies with regards to parkland acquisition in the area, other amenities that we would like to see. There's still some broader transportation concerns over and above BRT. What does that mean in terms of, you know, if we need to give up a lane of traffic along Marine? You know, there's a lot of complexity to additional development and transit arriving in Lionsgate. So staff are saying at this point, we don't want to give zoning away because then the development can take place and we haven't undertaken.
We lose the potential. Yeah.
So that's where in terms of the time horizon, that's not something we can do in a matter of weeks or even a couple of months. That's probably a much more extensive conversation. So that's why we're cautioning very strongly against pursuing changing the zoning in Lionsgate at this time. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Well, I respect the staff's recommendation, but it gives me limited options. You either kind of do the whole corridor, which is one option, or you do site specific, which will take more time, right? So if I'm not prepared to open up the whole corridor, can I do site specific? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I mean, at the end of the day, we will follow council direction. If council directs us to pursue site level analysis of zoning, we will undertake our best to do that and deliver that with the view in mind that, you know, we do have a legislative deadline of June 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
I have some questions, if I may, Mr. Smith. So on option, some comments. On option one, I tend to be supportive of applying the natural hazard exemption report that we talked about previously. So I agree with the staff recommendation there. On two, this is Marine Drive corridor. I guess my first question would be, submit a time extension application to the province prior to June 1st, 2026. Now, I seem to recall the last time there was, you had to apply for an extension. It also implied that you closed the door to some other avenues along the way. Is this just simply a straight up exemption, or do we have to sort of agree to anything else in the province to get the extension?
So it's not an exemption, it's an extension. So what we would be doing is we would be identifying the issue that is taking place in Marine Drive. So under the legislation, you can request an extension if there's an active infrastructure improvement underway to address public health and safety. There's also one for exceptional circumstances, and this would probably be the circumstance that we'd be applying for, is that TransLink is actively investing in planning for bus rapid transit in the Marine Drive corridor, and that will, we have all hope and indication that that project will proceed, and should that project proceed, it will lead to station areas being developed in that corridor with the TOA, with, again, through provincial legislation, having densities much higher than SSMUH would be exempted from SSMUH if they become TOAs. So what we're saying is, in recognition of the work that is underway at TransLink and regionally across the North Shore, we should extend the time frame for having to implement SSMUH in that area until such time as we have greater clarity and certainty as to what will take place with BRT. And so our extension request, and this will be subject to the report should council choose to proceed with this, would be looking to put that, extend the deadline out to 2030. And in that time frame, should the province approve that extension request, we would have hopefully greater clarity about the future of bus rapid transit on the North Shore.
If you could just refresh me, is it the OCP that triggers SSMUH, or is it the current zoning that triggers SSMUH?
Current zone.
So changing the OCP, which is the staff recommendation option 2.2, doesn't actually have a material effect on the implementation of SSMUH or not.
Correct. It would staff would feel it would send a signal to the province that the intentions of the district in the future, should transit investment arrive, would be for higher forms of residential development in that area.
I understand that our neighbor in the city has implemented a special study area for Grand Boulevard, and they believe that that has given them some protection from implementing SSMUH in that corridor. It's not called a special study area, but is that effectively what that kind of is, where you're sort of using the OCP to signal intent to do something different with the space? In their case, though, it's to cap the density, so I don't understand how that would work.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, how they're choosing to implement that tool and the legality of that. I'll certainly look further into that.
It's under the heritage issue.
Yeah, but not every house in that area is a heritage house. There's very few, but okay. So again, I support the staff recommendations on option 2, and the ones that don't have staff recommendations, I agree with. When it comes to 3, which is the 6-unit regulation, of course, I'd like to try to get some affordability or specialized housing into those as an option, if that's implemented. So that's one that I disagree with the recommendation here, which is I do think that the if wherever we reasonably can, we should try and go for affordability in that, because otherwise, like, they're really giving a huge benefit and uplift to a property and since you don't extract CACs or any other thing from it, the municipality is getting nothing in return for the uplift. We're getting all of the additional costs. And so it would seem reasonable to me to pursue a 6-unit having some contribution back to the community of some kind, if that's possible. So I don't agree with the staff recommendation on 3. I would go for the benefit back to the community. On 4, I do agree with the staff recommendations on use of our TC. I do want to see some analysis about where it could be used effectively to, not to hamper SSMUH, but to try to support our town centers appropriately in and around those areas. I think there is opportunity for that. So the only other comment, and we've all at different times expressed support or frustration for this process and challenges with the communications between provincial government and municipality. This Bill 25 has been brought forward really in a way that is just terrible for the relationship between the provincial government and the municipality. We were at the Union of BC Municipalities in September. We, as a council, went and presented to the minister on issues of concern to us. And less than 1 week later, they announced Bill 25. They had every opportunity to consult with the mayors and councils from BC, because a large representation of us were in Victoria and had meetings with the minister in the previous week before they introduced it. They chose not to. Very deliberately chose to not tell us about Bill 25. Instead, we had in our hand a compliance letter for the previous changes for our municipality. I find that level of disrespect for municipalities and what we do with land use in our communities to be absolutely unacceptable. And it has caused a huge rift between municipalities in the province, and you're seeing a number of municipalities push back to it. Had they wanted to consult, they had every opportunity to. So when they go out into the public and say that they've consulted, they're not talking about municipalities, they're talking about builders. And I find that very frustrating, because the bulk of the cost is going to be dropped on us. And so very disappointed that the province has decided to pursue this in such a disrespectful way with the municipalities. And, but you have my recommendations so far on this. I think Councillor Miri was next. Councillor Miri.
Where's the page of concerns with Bill 25 and the impact of this in the community?
Well, we've identified some of the issues around servicing and the implementation challenges.
Like the cost to the municipality, who's going to pay?
Yes, that is addressed in the report and part of the financial section. I mean, it is challenging to predict because we don't know the number and the location where. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Yes, there will be costs, but at this point, we cannot provide greater certainty on that because we don't know the number and the location of where they will take place.
I think the presentations that I've seen thus far is really focusing on, you know, the built form rather than the true impacts of cost to the infrastructure, the expansion to infrastructure, how you know, First Nations won't be part of this, but their densities are going to increase levels and cost to infrastructure, the lack of DCCs, and then the details in regards to things like parking and impact to local neighborhoods, increased service needs. We spent very little time on those and a lot more time on maps as to where all of these units could go. So I am really concerned with that because the devil's in the details with this. This proposal by the province went through zero consultation with us, zero consultation with Metro Vancouver in regards to utilities and how this would impact the overall built form of communities, very skewed. We've seen reports on the news in regards to other municipalities that have implemented and the issues that they're having and the pushback, and that has to be given equal consideration because the issues are so varied but also so significant. Very little data was collected by the province, and probably none, in order to get to this place. And all of that information is coming out within the community now, that this is not going to solve anything. It's going to create speculation. That's what it's going to do. So I'm disappointed that we haven't really looked more closely at that and the impacts to that, because we have experienced it in the past.
To just, if I may for one moment, we are in the second part going to address some of those kind of neighborhood consistency issues and some of the parking concerns. That's kind of more of some of the site level things. So Kevin, in his part of the presentation, will be delving into some, but certainly not all. And also just on one last thing with regard to the financial impacts, the DCCs for SSMUH, they'll be treated as townhouses. So I think the DCC currently for that is approximately $65,000 per unit.
Yeah, well, we're talking about DCCs generally across the board. They're sort of disappearing. We don't know the position of the federal government right now in regards to DCCs. You know, we had a good conversation last week in regards to how are we going to pay for all these things going forward? Because we had very different mechanisms decades ago, and we don't have them anymore. And so how are we going to move forward? I really feel like this is a siloed approach to a very large issue that is void of the kind of details we need to make good decisions. In regards to the natural hazard exemptions, thank God, because God forbid that we didn't have the ability to remove the natural hazard exemptions. We are dealing with, on a regular basis, issues with atmospheric rivers, debris flows, stability. We have water running across the municipality and down the mountain. And so the hazard exemptions are a no-brainer. Number two, I have no problem asking the province for an extension. But to suggest what the extension is going to be for kind of rubs me the wrong way. Because last time I checked, the community takes part in amendments to the OCP and determines the future of a specific area. And we in the district, I feel, more times than not, focus only on residential housing and not the business part of our community, the economic part of our community. And I understand building and construction is part of the economy. But we have a port. We're part of the biggest port in this country. And we need to support that port. And it is becoming more eroded as the years go by because we're not focusing on the business part of our community. And to suggest that we are going to be looking at higher density in an area where last time I checked, in the last statement you made to this body publicly, was that there's no money for the VRT. There is a plan, but there's no money for the buses. We have a plan, but we're going to have to possibly take roadway. The suggestion that we are going to ask for an extension because we're going to be looking at significantly higher densities along this corridor of residential housing is such a huge concern for me. And I'm quite surprised and shocked that we would be even mentioning that before we sit down and look at that area and understand what it's about. And look at the commercial down there. Look at the light industrial down there. We are eroding our light industrial in this community, and we've been doing it since the approval of the OCP in 2010. And in the document, it says protect light industrial and commercial. It also says protect older affordable housing, but we know how that's gone. So we have to be really careful with our language and what we're suggesting because we've seen what speculation does to the price of land. And I think that we should be very, very cautious with any intentions to signal anything. If we want to request an extension to merely wait until we have more certainty about a transit corridor, no problem. That is completely fair. But to articulate and suggest that it's going to be something that this community has not discussed or debated or this council has debated, I'm disappointed that that's what's happened. So extension, yes, but we have no idea what those areas are going to look like. And this circle actually encompasses Lower Capilano, the Squamish Nation. I'd be interested to see what they have to say about this. 3, the 6-unit SSMUH. The mayor says he does not support requiring affordable housing or special needs housing for the 6 unit.
Sorry,
Well,
I do support.
Oh, you do. You do, yes. So you don't support option one, you support option two. That's what I meant, sorry. Yeah, so you do. So, how does that work? I mean, we already know that it's going to be a lot more expensive, this type of housing to build. Is this going to be even more expensive? I support multi-generational housing, and the ability for certain properties to accept this kind of density. I disagree vehemently with the blanket proposals that the province is laying on the municipalities. But for a property owner that has a significant piece of property, what does applying a sixth unit of affordable housing mean? What is affordable? Like, what does that mean? Does it mean that, anybody that's building this, well, you're gonna have to make a one bedroom, $1,600 or, what does affordable mean?
Mr. Smith?
So if we were to move forward with consideration of implementing the requirement for an affordable or a supportive unit for that sixth unit in the SSMUH, we would have to set some parameters. So similar to the conversations we've had around inclusionary zoning, we'd probably pick a level of affordability and because one of the requirements, if you are going to implement that requirement in zoning, you need to have undertaken economic analysis to say that it's viable. So we would be bringing back proposals in terms of setting a level of affordability and also what kind of a supportive housing unit would do that, and we would have an economic
So we're
economists
going,
evaluate that.
okay, so we're gonna be doing an economic analysis on a 6-unit building sitting on a single family lot. Like, I don't get that at all. That makes zero sense to me. Like, so everybody's gonna have a different perspective on why they wanna do this. Some it's gonna be speculation. They wanna try to make some money. Others it's gonna be for their family members. We're gonna do an economic analysis on a 6-unit building to determine whether or not we can get 10% below market in North Vancouver. So anyway.
I want to clarify that, Councillor. I think the economic analysis is something that can be applied to multiple projects. I think it's just determining that a 6th unit could be built in that economically. It's not for an analysis of each individual
No,
project.
it would probably be, a representative sample of a few properties in those areas. We'd run kind of some scenarios and that would form the basis saying, yeah, yay or nay.
Okay, well, I'm going to choose option one. I do not agree with that because I think that I don't want to do what the province is making us do. I don't. I recognize it's under legislation. There's some, groups of people out there that are thinking about ways to address this because it's been done so unfairly with no information. But this is just going to make it far more complicated than it already is. And so I'm not in favor of that. And then 4, and quite honestly, I feel like these two things have kind of just been sprung on us in the last, from the last minute. We've talked about, rental tenancy issues. We've talked about affordable housing. It's all over the map. But applying it to SSMUH, you may understand it. You may get it completely. I'm not sure if it's clear within the community and how it's actually going to work. Option 3, for me, just on its face value, makes no sense. But I'm not even sure about the details to, the rental tenancy zone. Because it really hasn't been brought up in the past.
Yeah, so.
This is really one of our only meetings on this issue.
I understand the rental tenure zoning is a complex tool, and it should council signal that they would like for us to do further analysis. The intention would be to bring back a fulsome report
In March.
in March.
So we're midway through February. When in March? We have 2 weeks of spring break. So I guess I'm just going to state that.
Can we just clarify? And that would be a requirement before April implementation under the provincial regulations? Or if it comes in afterwards, you just run the risk that someone will pull the trigger on a development in the interim time?
Well, I mean, the current plan, as was laid out in the presentation, would be to introduce the bylaws for first reading in mid-April. And staff's current intention, should council signal an interest in pursuing or exploring further and receiving further analysis and detail around the implementation of rental tenure zoning, staff would deliver a report prior to first reading so that council could then signal their intention. It would be at a council meeting through resolution saying we would like to see rental tenure zoning in the implementation of SSMUH, and then we would have that as part of the package that would be for council consideration in April.
But there's nothing in the Housing Supply Act or anything else that restricts us from putting in the residential rental zoning, so tenure zoning before
Or after.
Correct.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
there's the point. We are trying to fit everything in before this deadline that the province has made us follow. And I think we're way ahead of ourselves, and I'm not going to support trying to squeeze everything in because we want to check some boxes off and we think it's more efficient, because you may completely understand this. I don't think we do. I don't. So I'm not going to support rushing anything. I know we're also trying to squeeze our zoning bylaw in here to try to deal with this. We have not touched our single family zoning bylaw in 40 years. And we've had 2 meetings, I think, and now we're trying to get it in before this deadline because we want to do things side by side. So I just think this approach is not okay. It may work for staff. I don't think it's working for the community. I think the community wants to understand more about the zoning bylaw. There's a lot of details in there that we would like to talk about and get it right and not be rushed by the province's deadlines. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillors Hanson and Ma. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one question before I am going to give comments on the 4 issues, but just one question. And this is with respect to the natural hazard exemption. In the report, Mr. Smith, you said you reached out to a number of municipalities, but only Squamish decided to apply the hazard exemption to SSMUH. Do you have any sense of why the others didn't and why Squamish did?
No, I don't, would be my short answer. And there were other municipalities.
Mr. Miller.
Most communities in British Columbia applied SSMUH in June of 2024. They did not have time between when the legislation was passed and the Bill 44 and June of 2024 to do the kind of analysis that I think would need to be done. The good part about the district is we've done a lot of analysis on hazard issues in the community. We have a pretty good idea of the impacts. And staff who reviewed the option of having a hazard exemption area felt confident, both the fire chief as well as the chief engineer at the time and the head of North Shore Emergency Management all felt confident to recommend that a hazard exemption area was appropriate, knowing that there might be future studies that would further refine and modify that boundary. But we had sufficient time then because of our background and knowledge of hazards. Not all communities have that same level of knowledge.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you for that clarification. And thank you for the report. I thought it was a very clear report. You did a commendable job, in my view, of presenting complicated material in a straightforward way. So thank you for that. And thank you to my council colleagues for their comments. On the natural hazard exemption, I do support the staff recommendation. I realize this is going to result in the loss of 7,000 lots to SSMUH, but I do agree with the assessment that was done on May the 17th, 2024 with respect to the hazards. On the Marine Drive, Lynn Valley corridors, again, I agree as Mayor Little has with the staff recommendation. If in fact we're going to get bus rapid transit in this area, it would then, in my view, be an area well suited to higher density. I did support option A when it was up for discussion earlier. I supported channeling growth into areas with better infrastructure, especially transportation infrastructure. And so I agree with the extension.
It's Marine Drive, Jim, not Lynn Valley.
Oh, pardon me.
Lionsgate Marine Drive.
Right. Marine Drive, pardon me, Marine Drive. Then with that leaves then Lynn Valley to be the SSMUH area and a portion, of course, of the Marine Drive that's not covered by the higher density proposal. With respect to the 6-unit SSMUH regulations, I'd like to see us require affordable housing on the 6th unit. I appreciate that you're doing study on this, but I support Barry Little's position that we should try, if we're giving this kind of lift, 6 units on a lot that's close to transit, so these will be in Lynn Valley and some areas of Marine Drive, we should seek something in return by way of a social benefit. So I'd like us to be a little more aggressive there, I think, than I saw was in the staff language. I also think there's opportunities for rental-only tenure with SSMUH. I appreciate you have a plan, and I do support your plan, but I would like to see that move along at a pace that we can contemplate at least rental-only zoning as the SSMUH is introduced on this year's implementation deadline. And I think those comments respond to the issues that are before you in the before us in the report. And again, thank you for the clarity of the report.
Councillor Mon back. Councillor Mon, go ahead.
Okay, so Jason, Mr. Smith, I'm just going to follow up on my question and actually go through some of my options. Although issue number 2 is a little complicated for subparts. So getting back to number 1, I think, as I said, of course we want exemptions on natural hazards for safety. So agree with that. So when it gets to 2, there's a lot of little details in here that takes a little more thought. And I agree with Councillor Murray. There seems to be a lot of stuff. No, the staff working towards that line. I totally appreciate it. But it seems to be the issues are kind of forced, so we don't really get to look at them as closely. So with 2.1, I will agree with the staff recommendation to submit a time extension to the province. Point 2, amend the OCP to designate higher density along the Lionsgate Marine Drive corridor is too open a statement, and I actually voted for option B previously, so I'm not going to support the staff recommendation there, if that makes sense.
Just to clarify, the intention would be if council signals an interest in OCP amendments, we would come back in March with a report with more specifics as to what those OCP amendments would be, and they would be elements that you have seen of option B in relation to that extension area.
Or after.
Sorry, this is going to be done by March. Where's the public input component?
So the thought would be, and again, this is totally at council's control and discretion that you are deciding on this. The rationale would be that if they were elements that had been discussed thoroughly as part of the OCP update over the last year, there was tremendous conversation about what should happen with the future of development in Lionsgate as part of the OCP update. That those conversations led to the presentation of the 2 options to the community, with one of those options having those higher density residential designations in that pocket where we're considering an extension area request. So staff, and again, this is totally council's discretion, staff feel that there have been, the OCP amendments that we would be bringing forward for council consideration and decision would be ones that have been part of the conversation over the last year with the public on the OCP update.
Thank you for that. At the same time, there has been some significant changes since that year time. I actually identified where 2 BRT stops might be and what that means if they become TOAs. To me, that's new. That's not something that people would have taken into account. So
let's be clear about the difference between a frequent transit area and a TOA.
right.
Mr. Milburn?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, so staff got 2 recommendations associated with this item. An extension request is separate. I'm hearing so far, mixed support, but some council supporting. Lots of hesitancy and concern about the OCP component. That's a separate conversation. I think Jason said that would only embellish an extension request, but wouldn't it be technically required?
Correct.
You're not required to show the province that you've got an OCP amendment in order to seek an extension request.
So let's not do
Okay,
that.
so those are separate. So the extension request could go on its own merits. The merits being, we've got a BRT conversation
Yes.
ongoing that the Trans Lake is having in the community. And any kind of density would be subject to that transit being in place, as well as, of course, any other amenities and services that would be needed by the density would go along if it's accepted by council, right?
I appreciate that,
Yeah.
that clarification. I still see it as two decisions. And we're kind of making it into one, like, okay, we'll approve it, but this one comes along? No, I support the extension so we can better understand if the BRT is really going to happen, all that kind of stuff. I'm not supportive of saying the OCP has to be part of it. So that's going to be bifurcated if that's possible.
Very clear, thank you.
Okay, and then with number 3, this one's a tough one. Like, if the whole discussion about tenure also plays into this, if each potential SSMUH 6 units, one of them has to be affordable, that's potentially going to, as I think the report says, it's going to affect the uptake because there's going to be another requirement. But at the same time, as this council has said, we want affordable housing. You look at some of the projects that were developed along in Lions Gate, a couple were held up or came back again when we wanted more affordable units. So we're trying to make a livable municipality, but someone else is kind of like putting their thumb on the scale to tip it, and that's the part that's frustrating. That we want to do this, but now potentially we're going to have each 6-unit SSMUH have a affordable housing, which may not fit that community. It's just, I just find it tough to make such blanket decisions when we don't have, or a blanket across the district when we don't have the ability to kind of plan it in certain areas that might be more conducive to that environment, for lack of a better word. So this one I'm going to disagree with. It's just at this point. And then I will agree with the residential rental and the zoning further analysis coming back in March. Thank you for your work.
Councilor Mott, Councilor Beck.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Mayor Little. Thank you very much for the presentation. This is an extensive report that you did a great job laying out and presenting to us. I guess I'll just kind of go through where I stand on the different issues that you're looking for direction on. In terms of the hazard exemptions, I certainly see the need, but I'd like to know, why we're applying such a blanket approach. We're talking about 7,000 lots. It's not a small number. And I guess what would need to change technically or financially for some of these exempt areas to come back into play over time? And what sort of frequency would we be looking at those areas again and saying, maybe we should be taking off that exemption? And why can't we look at it in some cases as a site by site rather than large areas?
Yeah, so I can answer this to the mayor. As outlined in, I think it's attachment 6, it indicates that in order for us to kind of go away from the blanket approach, it's a multi-year approach to do more technical work. And so should we move forward kind of as SSMUH's back on the table in 25, if the council kind of supports the staff recommendation, that would then start a fairly robust process of continuing to explore the natural hazards components that we're talking about. And at that point, it could modify or refine what that looks like, but given the short timelines, this is back on the table again, it's just the best approach we can do to justify it.
Okay, so it is something that we would be continuing to look at as we go on.
Yeah. Just to be clear, at council's direction. So if council wanted a speedier review or a slower review, we'd take that direction. There would be costs. We'd want to give you information on the costs and the timelines associated with it and the scope. Whether or not we look at it, would probably be at the neighborhood level because these are really neighborhood level impacts, right, in terms of, appropriate fire suppression and evacuation, and all these kinds of issues come up. And, but again, we take council's direction. How quickly would you want us to refine that?
I just think about as we continue to invest in climate action, initiatives to, improve some of those hazards in some of these areas, then, it is, I think, incumbent upon us to be relooking at that. But for now, I support option 1.1. In terms of the second issue around frequent transit areas, what happens if we're not granted this extension by the province? What are our tools at that point to preserve higher density levels potentially along that
If an
corridor?
extension request is turned down,
Yeah.
the deadline of June 30th applies, and if the decline comes after that date, the municipality would have 90 days to implement.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So we're working towards a deadline.
Yeah.
So let's say theoretically we have council's resolution to apply for an extension in March. There is a possibility we will receive an answer from the province prior to June 30th. So regardless, I think you have 90 days from the decline, receiving the decline from the province to implement.
And then at a future date, we could potentially look at that corridor again. So I am supportive of option 2.1 and 2.2, recognizing that 2.2 is still going to involve some level of engagement. Even though we've done a fair bit in terms of looking at higher density through that corridor, there would still be some more engagement, wouldn't there, with the community?
I mean, reality would be very limited. There certainly would be the public hearing in May, but engagement much beyond that is probably not feasible given the timelines we're working with.
Okay. I still think as a council, I'd like to have more of a discussion around that whole corridor, and I think the point was raised around the business mix and the commercial along there. I still feel like there's more of a conversation that has to happen around it. I agree with the fact that that's an area with BRT coming that we should be looking to have higher density there, but I feel like there's more issues that we haven't really had a chance to really explore. And then in terms of the third section and the affordable housing requirement, I share the perspective of Councillor Ma, and that I'm not sure if it's going to make project more feasible or not. I think it might actually limit some of the uptake given the relatively small number of units, and I'd love some more thoughts on that.
So just so the staff recommendation is to not pursue that 6-unit requirement.
Yeah, so I guess in this case, I support that staff recommendation. I think it would potentially hamper actually seeing uptake of SMUH. Not that I'm not, somebody who is a proponent of affordable housing in all parts of the community. I just think this is not where we're going to be able to deliver it. If it's not getting built, we're not going to get any affordable housing. So I'm just questioning whether we want to add another layer there with that. And then in terms of the rental tenure zoning, yeah, I'm supportive of further analysis on it. Again, I wouldn't want it to impede actually getting some of these built. So, but I think it's something it's a tool that we have and we haven't really explored in detail. So I think we should have an analysis of it. Those are my questions for the first round.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Poe.
Thank you. And thank you very much for all of the work that's gone into this. So for issue number 1, in regards to the hazardous zones, I agree with some of the comments that Councillor Back has made about the fact that it is a blanket 7,000 homes that will automatically be excluded. And I do remember that when this came up before, we talked about homeowners who want to have 4 units on their property but may fall into that zone. And there was the issue raised that some of them have put in special fire protection and taken many measures to ensure that their house is fire protected. And so I'm thinking about that and wondering if we could build in something that enables homeowners to appeal if they have those kinds of situations. Just to give them, some kind of flexibility, rather than just kind of a blanket, everybody in this zone can't. As far as, otherwise, I of course support the hazardous exemption zones. And as for item 2.1, I actually do support option 2.2 to amend the official community plan to signal higher density. I'm remembering that for option A, and had we chosen option A, this would have already been zoned for higher density in that corridor. And we wouldn't have to be going through this complicated mess. So that wasn't done, but what was done was extensive engagement with the community, which supported option A, actually. In fact, 68% of residents told us they wanted more density along the corridors. That was over several months of engagement and many surveys and everything else. So to me, we know that the BRT is going to be is almost certainly going to go in there. We need to plan for it. We need to get on with it. We need to have zoning there for higher density. So I agree. While I agree with the option 2.2, I'm somewhat concerned about submitting the extension ask to the province for until we amend the OCP. I'm just wondering why we can't just go ahead with amending the OCP before March or April or whenever our deadline actually is.
To amend the OCP would require a bylaw process.
Yeah.
So should council choose to pursue option 2.2, the plan would be that staff would return in March with a report with more specifics and detail and analysis around what those OCP amendments would look like. Then at that point would be a decision for council to say, yes, we would like to see those amendments incorporated into the bylaws. Then that would be part of the bylaw package of OCP amendments to support the zoning bylaw rewrite that council would be making a decision on in early April. And that would be the most expedited process to complete the amendments to the OCP. But that process still would take until June to complete.
Yeah, okay.
Some of my,
I'm sorry, I'm not quite finished.
Go
I'm
ahead.
just pausing with my thoughts. As far as the affordability factor goes, yes, I really do feel like this is a unique opportunity where we can provide, if we're going to have SMUH, that we could make it affordable for some. And I'd like to see more of a business case for why that couldn't work. I don't believe that it couldn't. I do think that wherever we can, we have to seize the opportunity to build in affordable housing to our policies and bylaws. And I think this presents a new frontier of providing affordable housing that hadn't before been on our plates. And I would like to see us move forward with that. So I do, I'm not going to go with the staff recommendation to not require affordable housing, and I would prefer option 3.2 to require affordable housing or special needs housing for the 6th unit, or some or all of it. And I would like to see the consideration of rental tenure as well. So I also would support option 4.1.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Betty.
My own comments, can you just refresh me on SMUH, what tenure options are available? Is it one owner with the rest rentals, leases, stratas, co-ops? What are the different tenures that are available for SMUH?
That's a good question. So for new construction, if there is no other tenure requirement, strata would be feasible.
Strata on SSMUH?
Correct.
Why not?
Freehold strata.
So the other
Portability.
tools that are available, as been outlined, is in terms of rental tenure zoning, so that you could apply that to all units, so therefore preclude the ability to strata title. You could apply it to 1 unit, 2 units, or 3 units. If you're moving into the 6 units, you can be very selective in terms of how you implement the degree and number of rental units.
Who decides?
Council, through zoning.
And when are we gonna decide that?
Well, I mean, it would be creating requirements, and, someone could do more.
One whole meeting.
Mr. Milburn.
I think I'll slide over a little bit because it's good to compare this to what is in the situation now. So a house, suite, and coach house is permitted now by council, right, through zoning. You cannot stratify a suite, right, because under the building code, it is a single real estate entity with the principal dwelling unit. What SMUH zoning would allow, though, is if you had a unit, right, a separate unit, an accessory dwelling unit, that was really much like an apartment unit, right? It's a separate accessory dwelling unit. You could stratify that if it hadn't been previously occupied. So we do have situations where we have an existing home, right, and someone adds a coach house on the same property. You wouldn't be able to stratify that unless you got permission of council if the home was previously occupied, okay? Because council makes the decision on the stratification of previously occupied buildings. If it's a brand new home and a brand new coach house, and it's never been occupied, they don't have to ask to do a stratification of a building to either the approving officer or council. It can just get stratified, okay? So what rental tenure zoning does, though, is it creates this interesting authority where council can say, this is the tenure arrangement. We want the first unit, to be the owner, and all subsequent units to be occupied by tenants. That could be something that council could decide through rental tenure zoning. Okay, so you define what is the rental situation through the rental tenure zoning structure. And we would come back with options. If it sounds like so far the majority of council is interested in yes, coming back with more information. And so we would show you, okay, what does that work? And we would show you the options of how that would work. And visually, as well as in text, so that you could then judge whether or not that made sense for the community. And maybe it's in certain areas of the community, it makes more sense than others. So it has a geographic power as well. You can control rental tenure zoning by geographic location as well.
In your report, though, in the initial scan that you did of other metro local governments, no one else is doing this, right? Apart from City of Vancouver, it says. Any comment on that as to why they wouldn't even pursue it?
They have a charter.
None of the other ones.
No other municipality has pursued rental tenure zoning. Vancouver was for units over and above 6. The province in their guidelines strongly cautions against it because their view, and this is why staff feel if we are going to pursue this, we need to undertake our own analysis to see what the local conditions could deliver. But the province's view is that requiring rental units through rental tenure zoning would preclude the actual development. It would make it economically unfeasible.
Again, the province is speculating about all this, okay? SMUH hasn't been applied broadly across the communities and developed yet. So they're kind of speculating it may inhibit somehow. And the reason is when they speak to typical developers, most developers say, well, I would like to stratify. That would help me because I would build and then sell all the units. That would be the most economically feasible approach. However, the province did not prohibit rental tenure zoning on SMUH. They left it up to local governments to decide if it made sense for their community. And the three reasons why it might make sense in our community, for that I can think of, and council may have other reasons. One is council, the province has said you need to create a whole bunch of rental housing in the community through the Housing Supply Act. Okay, so they've told council you need to demonstrate you're building affordable rental housing in the community. Two, your current single-family zoning says that the owner needs to occupy the secondary suite or the principal dwelling. Okay, that's the current regulation within the current house suite coach house zone. So if you rental tenure zoning would be a lawful way for you to kind of take that same principle and apply to the SMUH scale. Okay, in terms of owner occupancy, renter occupancy. Okay, you'd be able to control that balance on a SMUH property. And third, because we know that yes, people would like to develop it in certain areas, right? We could tailor, we could say, well, this geography, it makes most sense to have rental. Close to rapid transit, close to frequent transit. You could tailor it to the community's needs for where you identify rental. So it's an interesting tool, right? Because it gives you that power. So those are three ones that just jump off the top of my head why you might want to explore it. Majority of councils are interested there. Majority of council so far has indicated that they're interested in us coming back with more information. We're happy to do that.
But we can apply it after?
You can apply it after. The only challenge would be is that if somebody has already started to build and intends to stratify, you wouldn't be able, they'd be essentially legally non-conforming with respect to that tenure. So you couldn't like revert somebody who had already taken advantage of stratification. Now that will be, as Jason mentioned, a small number of units in the first bit, but we don't know how many applications we're going to get, honestly, right? Where other communities have had in the order of dozens to, in Vancouver, they had hundreds of applications, but that's a much bigger center. So we don't quite know how many would take advantage of strata right away, but the people that were down that path, they would have some non-conforming rights to stratify. We wouldn't be able to like retroactively apply it to them.
And who would we be discussing as part of that feasibility study that we're going to do?
Well, the feasibility, we only have time really to do some economic analysis and then internal staff work. And then of course there'd be engagement with the community as part of the normal review that's ongoing with the zoning OCP.
And with
So
the industry,
with
the building industry, obviously.
Yep, we send out for comments from the building industry. They actually give us a lot of feedback in 2024. So when we went out, I gave 5 workshops, right, where I spoke to folks. Half the audience was kind of business industry, building people that want to take advantage of it, and half were local residents. It's just, I'm rough estimates. You know, about half were local residents who were petrified. And we're like, what? You know, this thing's going to go up beside me, and they were quite concerned. So we had both. We actually had a very interesting mix in the community of people that were interested in taking this opportunity and others that were quite concerned. Yeah.
Okay, so the floor's still mine, by the way.
And I
So
have a
my question was on tenure mixes, and so what I've heard is it can be singular owner renting out suites in space. It can be a strata where I own all of the stratified units and rent or occupy whatever I want. Or it can be a strata with multiple different owners in it and multiple different occupants types in the space, owner occupied or renter occupied. Is that the gamut, or can it also be co-ops? Can it be fractional interest? Can it be all of the other different tenures that are out there?
So I just clarify, if the second option was stratified, then rental tenure zoning wouldn't be applying to the property because you wouldn't need your.
No, but you can still rent it out.
Right, but you can do that with stratification without rental.
Yeah, I'm not actually saying specifically to RTZ.
Okay,
I'm just saying generally with a SMUH implemented lot, not with a residential.
So in terms of co-ops, that's actually regulated under the Provincial Cooperative Housing Act. So it's a separate authority under that. We wouldn't be controlling co-op housing through this tool. I'm not aware of any co-ops going into SMUHs, but I'm looking at Jason to see if he's aware of it.
No, I've not heard of that myself.
But we could do a little more outreach and research when we come back on that particular score. In terms of fractional interest, again, that would be the owner. So whoever owns it, either one person or multiple people in fractional, we treat it as the owner. And then if you have a unit that's a rental unit, it has to be occupied with a rental, not a fractional interest owner.
So they have to get agency from the group to act as the owner. No, appreciate that clarification. So within municipalities, we have something that is, something akin to a notwithstanding clause, but it's, I think we usually call it a withholding motion. And withholding motion is rarely used, but we did use it in the case of Deep Cove. One example, where we saw that there was a number of places that were proposed for redevelopment, and the zoning that was sitting on the properties is something that was a bit shocking and surprising to us, a relic of the 70s kind of thing. And so the municipality implemented a withholding motion to buy us some time to review the matter. You've said that there's potential for a gap if we don't implement the RRTZ on day one, or if we don't implement some of these other measures on day one, there's a potential for a gap. Does the municipality not have the ability to use a withholding motion to cover that gap in any way, or withholding motions cannot apply to SMUH, or what's the limitation?
Yeah, so there's actually a separate non-conforming authority specific to rental tenure zoning in the Act. So if you look at the rental tenure zoning section of the Act, there's specific rules around kind of non-conforming grandfathering situations. And so we'd have to refer to that. And council would not be able to pass a withholding motion that would supersede that. So we would just follow the non-conforming rules set out in the Act.
I will just say as, maybe a little color commentary on the matter. I know the reference is made to the difference between option A and B. Had there been an option C, as in don't do this, that would have been the massive majority number. And that's just my opinion on the matter from the comments I've heard from people around the community and attending all of the pop-ups and meetings that led into that. The other comment I'll make is that this is an abandonment of town center planning principles entirely. For decades, the planning community came to us and said, if you want to address tenure, mix of units, environmental impact, economic cost of producing units, there's nothing better that you can do than producing town centers with proper supports and services in them. And this isn't that. This is, I will say, idiotic in the technical sense, in that it's uninformed about the local impacts in that specific area, in my humble opinion. Having the radius go up into Pemberton Heights, so you're going to have six dwelling unit places in a place that doesn't have direct access to the frequent transit that the radius is pointing from, because you have, I don't know, how tall is the cliff over Bowser Trail there? 100 feet?
122 steps.
122 steps, yeah. And other areas where you have these barriers in place, it would have made more sense if the municipalities had been told, this is the count that you have to reach. What's your plan for reaching it? Because we would have put the units in a way that made sense to us, that could be supported by transit, supported by infrastructure, and whatever else. And so I'm not supportive of this approach, but you've heard enough of my comments, and I get a full slate of time to speak when it comes up to the regular meeting, and I'll use it. Councilor Muir.
Can we just look at, go ahead,
Councilor Muir is
Betty.
the next
Oh,
on the list.
I'm
Okay.
fine, I'll
She has
defer,
Betty, okay.
Betty
Yeah,
hasn't
that's-
spoken, go ahead,
That's
Betty.
fine. Okay, Councilor Forbes, go ahead.
I went through this report, like all of us did, I'm sure, in great detail, and I have some real concerns about, there's nothing in here that says how we're gonna finance infrastructure. How are we gonna build more schools? How are we gonna have another hospital? All that kind of infrastructure, and they're pushing the parking out onto the streets where there won't be any parking. So I'm concerned about the cost for the municipality for that. And then I'm also concerned about today's dollar, future dollars. What is the cost going to be, and what is affordability? That's the same question we kick around all the time. I have one question, well, I have more than one question, but one question is, it says SMUH development would be classified under the townhouse category, which would require approximately $65,000 per dwelling unit. How do you classify a 6-unit SMUH building with a townhouse? The impact is quite a bit different, as well as costs, I would think.
I think what we were trying to do is to get an approximate sense of what the typology would look like in terms of our existing DCC structure. And so that decision was made that that was the kind of the most close approximation in terms of the scale of development and the demand on services.
But you're still sticking with approximately 65,000.
At this time, but DCCs are regularly revisited and reevaluated, so that would be something we would obviously monitor on an ongoing basis and adjust as we see SHMU getting built out.
But on,
65,000 is a combination of ACCs and DCCs. It's like 37 and 27
for a townhouse,
Per unit.
for townhouse and for
Per unit of SHMU,
per unit.
so you get 6 times.
okay? I wish it wasn't written that way.
Yes. Per unit.
Yeah,
Yes.
financial impact here. Servicing cost, I just keep thinking we're paying for the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. We're
Yeah,
gonna have wet weather pricing come here. And then when this goes through, we're gonna have to have all the infrastructure in line. And I forget where I underlined it, but we have no right of refusal based on the fact we don't have infrastructure in place. So if somebody comes along and wants to build and we don't have the infrastructure, what happens? Do we have to build? Are we forced to build right then and there at that location?
Sort of. Mr. Wilbur, availability of local utilities and services, how does that manage the approval of SMUs?
Well, I think I might refer to
Mr.
our
Coleman.
administration engineers.
Oh, and he's referring over to.
Mr. Bell, there you go.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
The question is, does the availability and capacity of local utilities affect the implementation of SMUH? So if we don't have enough water supply to a neighborhood, does that get treated like a hazard exemption, or what happens in those cases?
The district's development service and bylaw sets a requirement for fire protection for different classes of housing, and SMUH is a higher classification than, say, single family, because it's a bigger footprint, it's more complex building, that kind of thing. So we will be mapping areas that have the appropriate level of fire protection, required level of fire protection, and in areas that do not have that level, we would need to deny a building permit. And then, of course,
Sorry, in the report it says you can't deny.
for matters of servicing, you can deny a building permit if a building is not adequately serviced. So if we go to an extreme example, if there was no water service at all, we wouldn't be able to issue a permit because there is no water service. Then you kind of move towards, well, how much is enough? And we have standards, in the standards prescribe how much is enough.
I'm positive I read, oh,
I can further explain.
Mr. Gilbert.
So Bill 44, and then matched by Bill 25, says council can't use its powers to regulate zoning to prohibit SMUH. Okay, so you could have a zone that allows up to that 4 to 6 units, but it doesn't say you can't apply the powers to regulate services to prohibit SMUH. They've essentially acknowledged by saying you can only use your powers on zoning. You can use powers on zoning, but you can also use your powers on servicing. Okay, so you still retain powers from a service perspective. And there's a good reason for that. Okay, if you create buildings that you cannot fight a fire if it burns down or it doesn't have enough pressure in order to meet the daily domestic needs, that's super problematic, right, from a development perspective. So what we did is we recommended to council some slight adjustments to the water and the sewer previously, which council agreed, which gave staff the power, based on the advice we've been given, give staff the power to refuse to issue the building permit if it's unsafe. And that just makes sense, I think, from the province's perspective too. It would still have the zoning, but we could refuse to issue the building permit if it's unsafe. We wouldn't do it for superfluous reasons like, oh, we just don't like it. No, it would have to be based on a legitimate, lawful servicing reason.
We
Yeah.
would have to have the backing.
And the applicant might say, hey, I'll pay for those services to be improved. And then we would respond to that
Or if it gets upgraded over time.
over time.
So denied this year, 2 years later, you come back.
So the challenge with SMUH, and I'll just add this one last thought, is they're relatively small, so they often can't afford big upgrades.
Right.
Okay, so often they'll say, taxpayer, could you please pay for it? through, or I'll pay for it, but I want a latecomer every other
Oh,
house on my
yeah.
street and collect fees from them over time. But that often doesn't make sense for one small development. So the tools that we have aren't great, okay, to develop small-scale multi-unit housing. And when I heard from all my, peers across the province, this is a real challenge for developing SMUH, especially if it develops like they describe it as mushrooms, okay? Happening dispersed throughout the streets and the community.
Yeah.
If development occurs in that fashion, very hard to figure out the servicing in an efficient way. It on a per unit basis, it's very inefficient, both in terms of staff time as well as effort by the developer.
So we can zone it, but if it's not safe, we can deny
Correct.
a permit.
Correct.
All over the place. The rental tenure zoning, and this comes by way of a member of the public to me. You're recommending an analysis exploring the rental tenure zoning. It could support rental supply, but there's two points that this person brought up to me. The province wants consistency and minimal barriers. The RRTZ is exactly the kind of barrier the province is watching for. This is why no other municipality has done it. What are your comments on that?
I took your first stab at it.
No, go for it.
The province noticed that some communities applied house suite and coach house lawfully in 2024. And they brought in Bill 25 to modify that. So absolutely, the province could look at modifications to the act to limit rental tenure zoning. They have the power to do that. The issue is though, what's right for our community, right at the end of the day. And so having some analysis and bringing that back to council will give you options to decide what is right for this community.
Okay.
And if rental tenure makes sense, we're happy.
Okay. Sorry. Too many pieces of paper here. We're assuming, the main assumption in here is we're assuming that the uptake's probably going to be slow. Giving us some time to work out the bugs and do other things that we may need to do. What if it's not? What if we get hit with 100 like Vancouver? What's the backup plan?
That we would probably, if we saw, through your worship, if we saw issues arising right away, right, we would just need to come back to council to try to make adjustments in a quicker fashion. If we see very modest uptake and we discover challenges later, then we would have more time. But if we see 100 applications all of a sudden and there's problems, we would come back to council right away and say, hey, we've got to course correct. There's some little issue that we've discovered here.
But that's only
So
if
it just creates a priority issue for us in terms of implementation, but we'd still be implementing.
And that's only if we saw the problem before the June 30th deadline, is that correct?
Or
Or
after,
saying
let's say after
after
it was applied, your worship, if council agreed to SMUH and applied it in the community, we would see some uptake. And your scenario is if in that, say that first year we saw 100 as opposed to say 5, what would we do? Well, we'd have to come back to council sooner to try to course correct if there were problems arising.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The other question here is, SMUH behaves like coach houses, is what you're saying, I think, in your report, correct? It's like coach houses?
No, I mean, the SMUH zoning, and this is something that Kevin will touch on in terms of some of the form and what we're anticipating. So perhaps that's a question we can save for the second half.
Okay, all right, because I was just going to point out the difference between the one is an ownership, homeowner project with lifestyle choices, and the other one could probably most likely be a developer product with different priorities. I just wanted to point that out, but I'll wait to hear for the second half. Oh, sorry. Lisa, you were next.
Next, I've got Councillor Murray, followed by Councillor Pope.
I'm just curious in the attachments in the report, why the maps for the hazardous area are different. So there's one on page 52, multi-unit hazard exemption area, and then there's attachment 7, the the legend is illegible. And then it says draft proposed hazard exemption areas. If you go to the paper PowerPoint, it has a different total of hazard exemption lots than the legend on page 52.
I would refer to, not sure why there's a difference in the presentation. But the map that's attached to the report would be the definitive one.
So, the one that we can't read the attachment. Like there's this one right here, so it has just a bunch of dots under the legend.
Yes, this attachment here that you referred to.
Okay, maybe we should try to, maybe square that for the next meeting. So how far, I mean, we have challenges right now, in our building department. How far does an applicant need to go? And how much money are they gonna have to spend before they realize, if they're going to be approved to have their building permit processed? Like, is it gonna be like a single family? Is it gonna be the same system?
Yeah, so, Your Worship, so we're working on a development application process review right now to try to find efficiencies for our single-family approvals. Those same kinds of efficiencies that we're developing would also apply to future SMUH. In talking with other communities that have been applying small-scale multi-housing for the last couple of years, it has taken more staff time and more administrative time initially to respond to small-scale multi-unit housing because it's new. It's both new for the development community, but it's also new for the local government to try to make sure we have the systems in place. And we would likely get more efficient over time as we processed it. But essentially, it's almost treating these like little townhouse projects, if you will, right? So often it requires a level of sophistication from the development community, right, in terms of how to build a multiplex project. It's a different level of skill set. And we're also updating our training internally for our staff because a general single-family building inspector can't necessarily review the plans for a complex building. We would need possibly level 2 building inspectors to review those. So we're doing all these things internally, such as staff training and preparation, so that we can do it efficiently in the future. But at the outset, there will be some learning, right?
Because we're very challenged right now. The development, the construction community contractors are frustrated now with simple building permits, how long they take and how many times we add on something else and something else and something else. One would expect with, 6 units on a single family lot that the addition of requests is going to quadruple. I think there's municipalities that are having those challenges now. When Coquitlam allowed this many years ago, thinking that it was going to solve some of their affordability issues, they had to hire a significant number of staff. There was a very low turnover and the land prices weren't what they are now. They really netted out very few in 10 years. So we're talking about our budget in a little while. What is this going to cost us? Just from an administrative perspective. We need more inspectors. Like, can we even get more inspectors?
Mr. Milburn.
Your Worship, it is essentially, time will tell, we work on a business model, so we try to match our fees to meet our service needs. And if we have a lot of applications, we collect more in fees and we have more resources then to dedicate to hire more staff. So we operate on that business model. We add and subtract based on demand. So if we have very little uptake, as many of our fellow peer communities have indicated, modest uptake, it would be a small amount of resource increase. However, if we were to get the 100 units in the first year that Councillor Forbes recommends, we may need to add.
I didn't recommend that.
Suggested may happen.
Yes, yes, crystal ball.
If it occurs, and pardon me for my misspeaking, if it were to occur in that scenario, we may need to add staff quicker. So I guess what I'm saying is we're going to be adaptive to the amount of demand that we see from the development industry, and then apply those resources so that we can respond Yeah, better than we do now. We want to do better in terms of our processing times and the whole process. Focusing on single family is all designed around.
I think it's still challenging, and we've been wanting to address some of these issues for many years, and it's very slow to addressing. I mean, we're still trying to get a parking pad down on Deep Cove Road. You know, I just find that super, you know, challenging, and I'm just, I'm concerned that we're walking into a hornet's nest with this, and the province clearly doesn't care. Just as we make some of these considerations and we talk about this tenure, what data and what information are you going to be bringing forward to the March meeting to determine what kind of housing and the cost of this kind of housing, what it's actually going to do to the level of affordability? Because this whole exercise has been about trying to create more units to make them more affordable. And now we're talking about the tenure of stratification on properties in North Vancouver, and we are somehow thinking that this is going to create a level of affordability. It's absolutely not, in my opinion. So are we going to bring any data forward to that March meeting so we can make a good educated decision about whether we keep this rental or look, and I guess if they tear everything down on a lot, they don't have to ask for permission as far as stratification, is that? Or is it new, like, I'm still not really
That's
clear. It's
correct.
tearing everything down. The whole house is gone, everything is gone, and brand new builds can be automatically stratified.
Without permission of council or the approving officer. That's a building strata, right? Doing strata. Yeah, that's correct. Simply registering it with the
So the price of those lots are going to absolutely skyrocket. You can sell 6 units. Wow.
The only thing is because it's so common across all the properties, I don't know that it'll have a huge land value impact because it's such a huge area that's all getting the same uplift. Challenge is gonna be once it's constructed. You know, if someone gets a very distinct personal benefit, and because it's not collecting enough to cover the cost of implementing it, the rest of the taxpayers are contributing to them getting a private benefit fund, which is.
But you're assuming that everybody in the area is going to want to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm not assuming that, I'm just saying that base land value is based on the flexibility of the zoning and the highest and best use value of the zoning. And so since everybody has the ability to do 4 or 6 in that scenario, I don't think it'll actually change the valuation dramatically. Once it's built, it's different.
Just raise what you had. So you're right, it's an economic analysis of the viability. It's also, just as Jason described, doing this kind of perform analysis on some select properties to see that they're essentially examples of what could occur. The interesting thing about the current market is stratification, like strata housing, is almost flat right now, okay, in terms of demand. So it's a challenging time to do that kind of analysis. We've had a number of larger developers, so they're doing, these mixed-use towers that the council's aware have converted to full rental, right? Because the rental housing opportunity actually makes more sense in these towers right now than strata, just because there's so much supply coming on stream with very little absorption. So it's an interesting time to do this economic analysis actually, because there's not a whole lot of demand.
But in fairness, I mean, a year and a half ago, we wouldn't have predicted this, that the market would have fallen flat.
Change.
We stand still. If I can use my parking pad, we're 2 years into a parking pad on Deep Cove Road. What takes us forever, that's not the same kind of world that everybody else is living in, and things change. So that market, by the time you actually build it, might change quite significantly, right? Because it is going to take a while to do it, and things change quickly. You don't know. There's a lot of unpredictability to this. And that doesn't help us plan for the future or address the needs of people that are living in the community and addressing the challenges of transportation and infrastructure and cost and taxes and the unknown consequences behind this idea.
So time marches on. I'm
You
going to come
always
to
say
council.
that when it's my turn.
Nope, so after Council Pope has spoken, I want council to put their mind to whether or not we want to go on to the second half of this presentation, or we can move it, because we have to reconvene our earlier meeting as a council still as well.
Well, we have a meeting tomorrow
Hold on,
night.
hold on. So we have an option of delaying part B to 5 o'clock tomorrow night, and then we have a 5 o'clock workshop and a 7 o'clock workshop.
Okay, let's do that.
Because we're already in the workshop, we have the flexibility to add and change dates and times without new notification. And so I want you to put your mind to that once Councilor Pope is spoken.
Thank you very much. So I'm hearing a lot of concerns here and in the community that SSMUH will lead to widespread development of single-family neighborhoods and overwhelming infrastructure costs. But your report is very clear that the pace of change is expected to be extremely gradual. So if we're talking about roughly only 1% of lots redeveloping annually, I think that translates to like dozens, not thousands, of net new residents per year with SSMUH. So, and even assuming a multiplex replaces a single home with, say, 3 to 6 households spread across the entire district, the annual population growth is relatively small. So based on all of that and the data that you presented with uptake rates and redevelopment, can staff speak to whether the concerns are supported by evidence or whether those fears are maybe overstating the probable impact of SSMUH?
Sorry, I think the question, Your Worship, I'll just answer it this way. I think you're asking whether or not any of the other council members' arguments maybe hold water. I'm not feeling very helpful, that I'd be very helpful in that regard. But in terms of what we do know, based on what other communities are doing in terms of development, is uptake has been relatively modest initially, okay, to this in their communities. But the challenge has been for communities is there is an outsized impact in terms of the amount of resources needed to approve every one of those units relative to, say, approving a townhouse project or a tower. So it's on a per unit efficiency basis. It's not really a super efficient way to deliver housing. It's the challenge that I have as administrative staff, trying to be efficient with our staff time. And it's new, so there's going to be growing pains, and we're going to be learning along the way and trying to be as efficient as possible. But we will need to come back with more information to council about how to finance, right, and how to service the infrastructure for the development we do see. So there's more to come, and we'll learn and adapt as we go.
Okay, just for the record, I know, I'm
sorry.
Like, I just feel that it's really important to stick to the facts. And one of the facts that we do not have is a number on the cost of infrastructure.
Right.
And yet we hear these, vague references all the time to the, oh my God, we're going to be overwhelmed with infrastructure costs. And yet there is nothing on paper that supports that. So
additional comments from Mr. Fox.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think part of your comment is valid, but once all the areas, the SSMUH legislation comes in and we rezone everywhere, engineering, and when we look at pipes under the ground and infrastructure, we have to design if every property was to that level for future. So if we were replacing a main, we would automatically assume that the growth potential in that area would be maximized. So we would replace that with a larger pipe. So then that would allow the development to happen easier in those areas that capital works has happened. So in the areas where there wasn't capacity, as we start to analyze this further, the province hasn't given us enough time to look at every single street in town. We do have some water modeling, sewer modeling to see what is acceptable. If we know areas that are short on there, that's where the servicing requirement could deny the building permit until that capital upgrade was made or the applicant decides to build it. So in theory, yes, there's concerns about that because the cost of building the infrastructure prior to development will be on the taxpayer, where it won't be necessarily on the DCCs or ACCs, et cetera.
So we do know the DCCs will come in at $65,000 a unit approximately for SSMUH. The other issue I just wanted to raise before we move on with the time constraints is the Pemberton Heights. And I'm wanting to raise it because, as everyone knows, the legislation enables 6-unit multiplexes within 400 meters of a frequent transit stop, and a few Pemberton Heights neighborhoods fall into that. But I honestly do not believe that this was the intent of the legislation. The intent was to provide more housing where people are close to transit. So I really think, and I wonder if we can ask the province for some sort of exemption there. The justification is that Pemberton Heights is a steep escarpment with no easy access to Marine Drive on foot. So it should be excluded from that consideration. Is that possible?
Mr. Milburn.
Your worship, we put the exact same question, but with respect to transit-oriented areas to the province.
Yeah.
So these were the circles, and in some communities, the circles crossed rivers, ravines.
Yeah.
The big issue for us that was clearly identified was Capilano University, where the transit exchange was. The circle included Heritage in the Woods at the bottom of the ravine with no easy physical connection for those people to move.
And across the river.
Yeah, across the river. And so the province said no. They would not modify their approach. It's a consistent approach across the province, and they had no intention of modifying their approach. That was their answer at the time. I suspect a similar answer.
That was a while ago though, right? We know this government can change its position on things.
No community that I've seen that's made a request for like a general exclusion. I've seen no requests responded positively from the province.
Okay, thanks. No questions.
But I think it's a fair thing to test under, because that was under TOA. And so
True.
if there's a way we can do it under 44 rather than under 47, then, I think it's a worthwhile venture, because I think putting 6-unit places up on Cortell up and it's just.
No harm in asking, right?
No harm in
Why
asking.
not?
Do you need
Right?
direction from council? And if so, we'll put it on the agenda for that
No,
discussion.
I think we, if that's all right, I'll just look at the room. If council's okay with us putting that question forward, we're happy to extend that
That's
question.
consistent with our previous
So a
position.
letter from council wouldn't make that stronger or?
One quick comment.
Quick comment from Councillor
So
Moffat.
just looking at the numbers, following up on the numbers, if there's 1% uptake of 20,000 units, okay, that's 200. And say they were on average going to be SSMUH of 5, just for average sales. That's additional 800 units. We're going through all this stuff for 800 units that we could probably get in 2 or 3 years if we stuck to our plans.
We can deliver housing much more efficiently in our town centers, the corridors connecting them. Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's something. We're more than willing to work with government if they're reasonable. This whole exercise for the last 2 years have been very questionable, and the results, may not justify all this effort. I just want to, it's just frustrating when you look at the numbers and, we want to provide housing, but we want to do it in a smart way where we know where we need to put our schools, our parks, and our infrastructure. Otherwise, anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to check in, we've had a good go on part A. Mr. Zhang has waited so patiently to do his part. We could charge on, or we can schedule a 5 p.m. To do part B tomorrow night before our 7 o'clock council workshop. I'm seeing nodding heads. Does anyone have an objection? I know Councillor Back, you sometimes have to do some things to get 5 o'clock to
I
work.
can be here for
5
5.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
5 o'clock tomorrow? Okay, so we'll now work under that assumption that part B is going to be stayed until 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Now you know
Having
it's
said
coming
that,
for tomorrow.
we do have a bunch of members of the public that are in the room here. I would like to set aside 10 minutes right now to hear if there's anything we specifically missed in our discussion. Would any members of the public like to add their comments? Ms. Fagan.
Hello, Catherine Fagan. To Lisa's question, which was about the maps in attachment 6, there are 2 different hazard maps there. The original one that we all saw along last year sometime, and the new one that you come along with. Why are the hazard classifications only wildfires and floods? What about the slope stability? We've got so much slope stability around here. The Pemberton Bluff has got a bunch of properties on it. Nobody can build a house there, so why are they not excluded from in those areas?
I think that's a fair question. Yep, Mr. Cullen?
So through the mayor, the way in which we approach it, there's a number of hazards on the North Shore. The reason why we focused on fire and flooding is because you can't manage or mitigate that risk with a single or several houses. So when we look at steep creeks and escarpments, as you've identified, that can be a select number of properties that could help mitigate that risk. When we talk about an interface fire between wildland and residential properties, that is an unmitigatable risk by one or a handful of properties. And then similarly with, say, the Seymour River or something like that, there's not a single property that could help kind of respond to that risk. So that's kind of where we've differentiated between a global risk and a more site-specific risk.
But a lot of those property lines were drawn with, I don't know who drew them, because there's a whole bunch of them out there that it says there's a property and there is no property. It is because it's a
Down the slope.
It's a 60-degree slope, so there's no property. So why, so you're operating on old property definition maps that have nothing to do with the actual topography on Vancouver.
Yeah. Your worship, just to answer that, I think some of the concern is predicated on the idea that people will be able to develop whatever they want in those hazardous areas for slopes to hazard. But council has approved a risk tolerance criteria. And if the developer comes in and can't demonstrate through geotechnical analysis that they meet the risk tolerance criteria, they won't be allowed to do their proposed development on that site. And also we assess the risk to neighbors as well. So they can't create risk with their development that causes a downstream impact in terms of the slope. So we can say no in those circumstances, but in many cases they can mitigate the risk through an engineered solution that deals with that site risk. But if they can't, we simply refuse the development.
The OTP used to have a BPA. There is some wording in here in your report about BPAs.
That's right.
And that's not addressed here at all, and should probably be.
Yeah. Your worship, just clarifying, development permit areas, while they do control things like, say, if it's a fire hazard development permit area, the sort of combustibility of the roof material, it doesn't control density. The density is set by zoning. So the question before council is increased density acceptable? And what staff are recommending is that, no, if you add that many units within that fire hazard area, it can't be mitigated by some non-combustible material on its roof. It's a landscape level hazard. And issues of evacuation and other issues come up with those concerns. So DPs cannot be used to control density, but zoning can. So that's the question before council is zoning.
But you're saying that if an extreme steep slope was there and someone proposed a house for it, staff would still have the mechanisms to respond without it being specifically a hazard area?
Yeah, and both at the development permit level and also the building inspector has the power under section 56.
Thank you. Okay, next I've got Eric Jensen joining us virtually. Eric, can you hear me?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can, but if you could speak a little bit louder, that would be helpful. Thank you.
No problem. How's that?
Excellent. Thanks.
Outstanding. Hey, so I think a couple things that I just wanted to shine a light on here is I've heard staff comment on we're just going to have to learn and figure it out. I think we need to be a little bit more cautious in terms of what that impact financially can be on the taxpayer. That is my number one concern, of course, because I am a taxpayer and I would like to not pay more. The other thing is from an affordability perspective, just to throw some easy numbers out there for everybody. If we're going to use 1.0 as an FSR rating, and you say you have a 7,000 square foot lot, which is going to give you 7,000 square feet of buildable space at a minimal cost of $750 a square foot, especially with my beloved stormwater management that we're currently having to deal with. We're looking at $5.25 million for 6 dwelling units to be constructed on that property, plus dirt, maybe 1.5 million. So we're sitting at around $6.75 million to have these 6 dwelling units. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to divide that by 6 and see that that's still well north of $1 million. So I don't think that any of this SSMUH is going to be checking any sort of affordability checkbox anytime in the near future.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Eric Jensen. Next, I have virtual participant David. We'll just move to panels there. Okay, David is over as a panelist, so just give him a sec here. Virtual participant David, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. I've heard the council and staff discuss applying for an extension to the province, and I believe it's been presented that an extension will be granted. And I'm wondering if there needs to be some space to discuss what council would do if an extension was refused. Because I also understand that extension responses from the province must be due before the June deadline.
I don't think they've established criteria for what they would approve and not approve, but the last time municipalities had to do that for the implementation of bills 44, they granted the extensions, and I'm not aware of one that was denied. Some were denied?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, there you
yes,
go.
they're actually.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, no, there's certainly no guarantee that extensions will be approved by the province. And certainly in 2024, many extension requests from other municipalities were turned down.
Can you give examples?
Not off the top of my head, but I can come back.
Langley.
Yeah, I've certainly, yes, it's not uncommon. They're there are guidelines for making an extension, so they do set out some parameters, and I think they purposely tried to gate it so they wouldn't get a whole slew of extension requests. So they set the bar fairly high in terms of what you need to provide to justify your extension request. Again, that's something we'll all lay out in more detail when we come back with the report, because we've heard the majority of council would like to pursue an extension request. But yes, they can be turned down, and as I was saying earlier, within 90 days of an extension being declined, the council would then need to implement SSMUH on the property.
Mr. Milburn.
Just to add to that, I think we've learned by looking at the communities that have been approved and denied, and we would try to draw from those learnings when preparing our advice for council in terms of seeking the extension. We try to tailor it to the most successful kind of application the province appears to have approved in the past.
It says Township of Langley, Maple Ridge, Souk, View Royal, and Mount Waddington Regional District.
Okay. So apparently there were 5 that were rejected last time, but we sound like we would only really have submitted this to Maple Ridge and Township of Langley. But,
I mean, maybe a bit of a prelude to what you will see. Port Coquitlam was successful in an extension request tied in part to transit investment. So that we've had conversations with their staff in terms of how they approach that extension request. So we're using that information to inform our approach as well.
Thank you.
Could I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah, it's not really a question and answer session. We've kind of turned into that, but we really want the benefit of your comments on the presentation tonight.
It's just a follow-up in asking staff around the recommendation around 2.2, if they see that then as a hedge to protecting density in a transit corridor if an extension is denied. I'm wondering if those are related from a staffing perspective.
Is that something we have a quick response for?
The underlying zoning would still be in place, and if the extension request would be denied, the assumption then would be that we'd be implementing the SSMUH zoning in compliance with the legislation. So regardless of what the OCP states, it's the underlying zoning that allows what you can develop on the property at the time.
Okay. Yes, and I probably that's kind of got to be the last speaker. Yeah.
Thank you. Some very intelligent conversation here. The question I have is, if there's $65,000 per unit, it's $390,000 for a 6-plex unit. Would that not offset some of the costs for infrastructure improvements, or where does that money go? That $390,000.
Mr. Milburn?
Your worship, in terms of the development cost charge portion, it goes to water, sanitary, storm, and transportation and parks. So we have numbers broken down in the DCC bylaws to how much, so it goes into reserves that help pay for network level infrastructure. So it doesn't pay the immediate offsites, that would have to be borne by the private developers. So if they had to do improvements on the immediate adjacent, that's separate. This is for network level improvements that have been predefined in the DCC bylaw. And let me just finish. And for the other portion, the amenity cost charge, that covers that are costs that are set out in the amenity bylaw. Okay, so there's specific community amenities that are separate from water, sanitary, storm, transportation, and parks.
I guess it doesn't really, impact the taxpayer as thought I heard.
Yeah, so the inequality is if you, I agree with Councillor Pope's comment about it, that I don't think this is gonna happen very fast. It's the asynchronous aspect of it that's problematic. Because if someone goes to the very end of St. Mary's and puts in a sixplex, that 300,000 doesn't go very far to provide services to it. We have to pony up for it. And so it's the asynchronous nature that it's not gonna happen. When we do redevelopment to the town center, the whole
pipe is
street,
done.
the next street, everything gets done, and so they're all contributing rather equally to it. That even though it sounds like a large number, because you now have to extend services into such an area, it doesn't cost.
And some areas that have already been serviced, like pipes have been increased already over the years because we've been planning for an OCP that saw a certain density, and now that density has changed based on the TOAs, the towns, the legislation that's been before. It's an increase on top of that has not been planned.
But we don't know that. We won't know that number until we see what services are in that particular neighborhood, as Mr. Smith said.
Nothing's free.
Okay, we've had a really good go of this tonight. We're gonna get around to tomorrow on it, and that's even still part of several meetings going out to April on this particular topic. So at this point, I'm gonna say we've completed the portion for A, and we're going to table the rest of the meeting until tomorrow at 5 o'clock. No, I'm going to not adjourn. I'm going to reconvene tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Accepted. Thank you very much. Council members, public, and staff for your preparation. Council members, why don't we take 5 minutes to have a stretch? We'll clear the room and then we'll reconvene our earlier meeting.